Imagine a Malaysia without oil and gas. No Petronas towers symbolizing prosperity. No billions in revenue funding our roads, schools and hospitals. Will Malaysia survive if the oil wells run dry? This isn't just a hypothetical question. It's the reality Malaysia faces today. With the world rapidly transitioning to green energy, Malaysia's reliance on oil and gas is being tested like never before. What happens next could either transform Malaysia into a new global powerhouse or lead to economic disaster. Let's uncover the truth behind Malaysia's greatest challenge yet: Malaysia's oil and gas dependency. Malaysia has long been synonymous with oil and gas wealth, thanks to Petronas, the national oil company that has been the backbone of Malaysia's economy for decades. Established in 1974, Petronas has contributed a significant portion of Malaysia's GDP and government revenue, often funding up to 30% of the national budget. From iconic infrastructure projects like the Petronas Twin Towers to subsidies for fuel and essential goods, the nation's prosperity has been deeply tied to its fossil fuel reserves. However, this dependency comes with a hidden vulnerability. Malaysia's economy has been built on the foundation of a finite resource: oil and gas. While this sector has brought immense wealth, it has also overshadowed other critical industries, leaving Malaysia highly exposed to fluctuations in global energy markets. When oil prices crash, the ripple effects are felt across the economy, from budget deficits to reduced development spending. In recent years, the global push towards renewable energy and carbon neutrality has raised alarm bells. Countries around the world are transitioning away from fossil fuels, and major players like the EU and China have set ambitious net zero targets. This shift threatens to erode the dominance of oil and gas as the primary driver of Malaysia's economic engine. What happens if demand for fossil fuels continues to decline? What if global oil prices no longer provide the cushion they once did? Malaysia's reliance on this single industry poses significant risks to its economic stability, job market, and long-term growth. The clock is ticking, and the question is, can Malaysia diversify its economy in time to survive a future without oil and gas? The impact of global energy transition. The world is changing faster than ever, and Malaysia's reliance on oil and gas is being challenged by the global energy transition. Major economies like the European Union, China, and even the United States are committing to aggressive carbon neutrality goals. Electric vehicles, renewable energy, and green technologies are rapidly becoming the standard, causing a significant decline in the demand for fossil fuels. For Malaysia, this isn't just an environmental concern, it's an economic wake-up call. Petronas, which has long been Malaysia's financial backbone, is facing mounting pressure to pivot towards greener energy sources. But the shift is easier said than done. Building renewable energy infrastructure and diversifying revenue streams require immense capital and time, and this transition comes with risks of shrinking profits in the short term. Globally, oil prices have become more volatile, and Malaysia is no stranger to the consequences. The oil price crash in 2014 slashed Petronas' revenue, leading to budget deficits, reduced government spending, and even job losses in the sector. Imagine a future where such crashes aren't the exception but the norm. It's a scenario where Malaysia's economic foundation could falter. In this changing landscape, Malaysia risks being left behind if it doesn't embrace the shift. Neighboring countries like Singapore and Indonesia are already diversifying their economies through renewable energy investments, digital economies, and tourism. If Malaysia doesn't act quickly, it could lose its competitive edge in Southeast Asia. The stakes are high. The world's shift away from fossil fuels is inevitable, and Malaysia must either adapt to the new energy landscape or face economic stagnation. But how does a country so reliant on oil and gas begin to rewrite its economic playbook? That's the billion-dollar question. The decline of resource dependency. For decades, Malaysia's economy has leaned heavily on its rich oil and gas reserves. While this dependence has brought immense wealth, it has also created vulnerabilities. The world is moving away from resource-based economies, and Malaysia's reliance on Petronas has put the country in a precarious position. Petronas alone contributes nearly 20% of Malaysia's GDP and plays a major role in financing public projects, from highways to education. However, this dependency on a single industry creates what economists call the resource curse. Instead of diversifying, Malaysia has funneled much of its focus into oil and gas. This leaves the economy exposed to volatile oil prices and global energy trends. When prices drop, as they did during the 2014 oil price crash, the ripple effects are felt across every sector, from jobs to public spending. Furthermore, the resource curse often leads to neglect of other vital industries. Malaysia has vast potential in manufacturing, technology, agriculture, and even tourism. However, these sectors haven't been given the same priority as oil and gas. Neighboring countries like Vietnam and Thailand have taken leaps in developing diversified economies, leaving Malaysia at risk of falling behind. There's also the issue of sustainability. Oil and gas are finite resources, and as reserves deplete, Malaysia will have to find new ways to support its economy. Petronas itself has recognized this challenge, recently pledging to move toward renewable energy, but such a shift is complex and requires time. The truth is that reliance on oil and gas is no longer a sustainable model for Malaysia's future. Global trends and economic shifts demand bold steps toward diversification. The question is, can Malaysia pivot in time to build a resilient economy that doesn't crumble when the oil stops flowing? Let's dive into what's next. The challenges of moving beyond oil. Transitioning away from oil and gas is not as simple as flipping a switch. It's a monumental challenge that Malaysia must navigate carefully. While the government has acknowledged the need for diversification, the road ahead is riddled with obstacles. One of the biggest challenges is overdependence on Petronas. For decades, the oil giant has been the lifeblood of Malaysia's economy, contributing significant revenue to the national budget. This over-reliance has created a comfort zone where alternative industries have not been developed with the same intensity. Petronas, alongside other major oil and gas players like Shell and ExxonMobil, directly employs over 100,000 Malaysians across various sectors, from engineers to support staff. This figure doesn't even account for the hundreds of thousands employed indirectly through supply chains and services. A sudden transition away from oil could lead to significant job losses, impacting countless Malaysian families. Global competition adds to the complexity. Malaysia is not alone in its push to diversify. Neighboring nations like Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam are aggressively positioning themselves as regional leaders in manufacturing, tech innovation, and green energy. Malaysia must not only catch up, but also carve out a unique space to compete on a global stage. Another pressing challenge is education and workforce development. Malaysia's reliance on oil revenue has historically funneled resources toward public subsidies and infrastructure rather than skills development. While Petronas and other oil giants have created many high-paying jobs, these positions are specific to the oil and gas industry. For Malaysia to transition successfully, its workforce must be retrained and upskilled for emerging industries like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. Without these critical shifts, Malaysia risks falling behind in the increasingly knowledge-based global economy. The environmental dilemma is also at play. While renewable energy offers an opportunity for growth, transitioning to cleaner alternatives requires a complete overhaul of infrastructure and policies. Although Petronas and Shell have begun exploring renewable projects, these are still in their infancy. Scaling them to become significant contributors to the economy will take years, if not decades. Finally, there's the political and social factor. Fuel subsidies, partially funded by oil revenue, have become deeply ingrained in Malaysia's social fabric. Moving away from oil revenue may necessitate reducing or removing these subsidies, a move that could trigger significant public backlash. Balancing fiscal responsibility with public expectations will be one of the government's greatest tests. The challenges are enormous, but so is the potential. If Malaysia can tackle these hurdles head-on, it could emerge as a diversified, resilient economy, less dependent on global oil prices. The big question remains: will Malaysia be bold enough to secure its future beyond oil? Let's explore the possible path forward. Regional comparisons. When examining Malaysia's journey toward economic diversification, we need to look at how its neighbors have tackled similar challenges. Each country in Southeast Asia offers valuable lessons. First, let's talk about Indonesia. Indonesia is leveraging its natural resources in exciting ways. The country is focusing on its vast nickel reserves to become a global leader in electric vehicle batteries. By banning nickel ore exports, they've forced international companies to set up processing plants locally. This move is creating jobs and driving industrial growth. Yes, they still face issues like corruption and red tape, but their bold steps toward EV production show what's possible when you prioritize resource-based transformation. Now, let's turn to Brunei. Brunei, on the other hand, is a cautionary tale. It remains heavily dependent on oil and gas. While this has provided a high standard of living, it also poses long-term risks. Their lack of economic diversification means they're vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices. Malaysia, with its larger and more complex economy, simply can't afford to follow the same path. And then there's Singapore. Singapore is the gold standard for economic diversification. Despite having no natural resources, they've built a thriving economy centered on services, finance, and high-tech industries. Their emphasis on education, infrastructure, and governance has turned them into a global hub for trade and innovation. Malaysia could take a page from their book by creating a business-friendly environment that attracts foreign talent and investment. But here's the thing. Malaysia faces unique challenges. Unlike its neighbors, Malaysia has a federal structure that makes economic transformation more complicated. Different states have different priorities. Take Penang and Selangor, for example. They're hubs for advanced manufacturing and technology. Meanwhile, Sabah and Sarawak are still heavily reliant on oil, gas, and timber. This regional imbalance makes it harder to implement a unified strategy. And let's not forget the political landscape. Frequent changes in leadership have led to inconsistent policies. Political instability makes it difficult to attract long-term investment. Plus, the reliance on federal funding often creates tension between national and state governments. One region might want to focus on agriculture, while another pushes for high-tech industries. It's tough to get everyone on the same page. So, what can Malaysia learn? From Indonesia, it's about leveraging natural resources to drive industrialization. From Singapore, the lesson is to focus on education, innovation, and services. And from Brunei, it's a warning not to rely too heavily on oil and gas. But Malaysia needs its own strategy. One size fits all won't work here. Targeted policies, workforce development, and consistent leadership will be crucial. Yes, the road ahead is challenging, but with the right moves, Malaysia can create sustainable growth that benefits all regions and sectors. Leadership and vision. Leadership. It's the force that steers a nation's destiny. And for Malaysia, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim holds the wheel. But is his vision enough to drive the country into a new era of prosperity? Let's unpack his role, his challenges, and his promises. Anwar Ibrahim, Malaysia's Prime Minister, has a vision for the nation. He speaks of reforms, inclusivity, and reducing reliance on oil revenue. But bold promises come with tough decisions. His government is heavily investing in education and human capital development, aiming to build a workforce ready for the challenges of a modern economy. Under Anwar's leadership, policies have been introduced to boost sectors beyond oil and gas. Initiatives in renewable energy, digital innovation, and agriculture aim to diversify Malaysia's economic pillars. But the road isn't easy. The global competition is fierce, and the pace of transformation must match the urgency of the times. However, public perception remains a significant hurdle. Malaysia has long relied on subsidies for fuel, food, and essential goods. Cutting these subsidies to free up resources for development has sparked controversy. While economically necessary, such measures are politically risky and face resistance from citizens accustomed to these benefits. Anwar's leadership is also shaped by his efforts to bridge the gap between Malaysia's diverse regions and communities. He emphasizes unity and equity, recognizing that economic progress must be shared across all states, from Peninsular Malaysia to Sabah and Sarawak. But will these efforts be enough? Can Anwar navigate the complex federal structure, overcome resistance, and implement reforms that will truly transform Malaysia? The stakes couldn't be higher. Leadership requires bold decisions, and Malaysia is counting on its leaders to act decisively. Anwar's vision could redefine the country's path, or it could stumble under the weight of expectations. The question remains, will leadership and vision be enough to break free from the shadows of dependency and guide Malaysia toward a brighter, more inclusive future? Only time will tell. Malaysia's future is at stake. The future of Malaysia hangs in the balance. With its oil reserves depleting and global demand shifting toward renewable energy, the country faces a critical choice. Does it lead the charge into a greener future, or risk being left behind in the shadows of stagnation? Malaysia holds immense potential to drive Southeast Asia's green energy revolution. The nation is rich in resources like sunlight for solar power and vast lands for wind energy development. By investing in renewable energy infrastructure, Malaysia could position itself as a leader in clean energy production, not just for domestic needs, but for export across the region. But leadership in green energy isn't enough. The foundation of a thriving economy lies in its people. Education and skill development are key to preparing Malaysia's workforce for a post-oil world. The government must focus on nurturing innovation, fostering technical expertise, and ensuring that future generations are equipped to excel in industries like green technology, digital services, and advanced manufacturing. The path forward isn't without risks. Failure to act decisively could lead to economic stagnation or even downturns. As oil reserves dwindle, so too will the revenue that sustains subsidies, infrastructure, and public services. Global shifts away from fossil fuels could leave Malaysia struggling to keep pace with more adaptive economies in the region. Opportunities and risks go hand in hand. If Malaysia seizes the moment, it could transform its economy and emerge as a powerhouse in green technology. But hesitation could cost the nation dearly, leaving it vulnerable to economic decline and diminishing relevance on the global stage. The path forward demands courage, vision, and action. Will Malaysia rise to the challenge and redefine its future? Or will it let the moment slip, tied down by old dependencies and missed opportunities? Can Malaysia survive without oil and gas? The answer depends on bold leadership, innovative policies, and the collective effort of its people. The choices made today will shape the Malaysia of tomorrow. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the time for action is now.